Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of a Wild Time Podcast, YouTube edition. This one will be going straight to the YouTube channel. If you've not subscribed yet, I recommend you go do that. Hit the like button, view the other older episodes, and we've had some good ones. So, today is August 18th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Day. On August 18th, 1973, Sally Hardesty, her invalid brother Franklin, and their friends fell afoul of a bizarre cannibalistic clan of serial predators. Miss Hardesty was the sole survivor of that night of terror. If that sounds familiar, it should, because that's from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 narration. Tonight, I was thinking how to celebrate Leatherface Day, and we definitely wanted to do something, we being me, myself, and I could rank the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films from best to worst, least to best. I could rank the actors that portrayed Leatherface. I don't want to rank them. I want to give my favorite parts because I have a soft spot for each and every film of the franchise. With that said, I'm going to tell each part and my favorite, what I dig the most about it, and I'm going to tell you what I dig about each Leatherface character. So the first one, let's go to the 1973 classic, the one that started it all, the grandfather of slashers, Leatherface. It is a masterpiece of horror. It's a masterpiece in independent filmmaking. With what they did, with so little, is monumental. It's amazing. I consider it the most horrifying movie of all time, especially when you're a kid, you've never watched it. Three brothers in an abandoned farmhouse, knocking off teenagers as they're one by one coming in. Leatherface, the youngest brother, is the butcher of the family. Then you have the hitchhiker who lures them there to the farmhouse, and then you have the cook who is basically a warning signal. He sends them on their way, and from that's basically a backstory on them. They're cannibal brothers. Drayton, the cook, being the oldest, hitchhiker, and then Leatherface. Sally Hardesty and her friends, like I said, the narration for part 3, are on their way in an old Volkswagen van. They run out of gas, stop at the gas station, and have a talk with the cook. He tells them the tanks are empty and won't be there till tomorrow, and that's when the horror starts. What I love about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I could sit here and I could tell you so many reasons. But I personally love Gunnar Hansen's portrayal of the cannibalistic killer. I got to meet Gunnar Hansen in 2012, and I asked him a bunch of questions. But the one thing that really stuck out when he was telling me about the research he did for the character, he would go to this, it really wasn't a mental institution or an asylum. The way he described it to me was almost like a school for the mentally handicapped. And he would go and observe the way they walked, certain ones, how they talked, and he morphed that into the character, basically. And he also said, Toby, when he was hired to be Leatherface, another cool little story, director Toby Hooper asked him, he said, "Are you crazy?" And Gunnar was like, "No." And he said, "Can you be violent?" And he's like, "No." He said, "Well, can you act like you're crazy?" He said, "Yeah, that won't be no problem. I can do that easy." And then he hired him. But Gunnar Hansen was so big that when he came in, his shoulders were so broad. He was just a big, burly guy that his presence on screen still sticks out to me as the best portrayal of that character. And I'll always refer to Gunnar Hansen as the original grandfather of slashers. So we'll move on to part 2, which is a total different take on the franchise. They went from one extreme to another with this one. Toby Hooper went out in left field for this one. The hitchhiker's gone. He's replaced with his twin brother, Chop Top. Bill Moseley portrayed him in a iconic role, which Bill Moseley is a horror icon himself. But the way that he takes the clothes hanger, scratches his head, picks the dead skin, eats it, just adds a serious gross factor to the character. And he's comedic relief. The cook, Drayton, as he is now known as Drayton Sawyer. He's more of an outlandish character than he was. He's more comedic. This is more of a black comedy almost. Leatherface is totally different he's more of a in-love teenager. He's got a crush on Stretch, who's a local DJ that catches a murder on air, and Sally and Franklin's uncle from the previous film is hunting Leatherface in the family, and he goes to her and makes her play it on air, and from then, that's when everything gets rolling. Chop Top and Leatherface pay a visit to the radio station. They nearly kill the co-worker of Stretch. Leatherface won't kill Stretch and informs Chop Top that he did. He did the job. He got her good. He got her good. That's why he said it. Did you get her, brother? Did you get her good? Man, Chop Top, Bill Moseley. The soundtrack was cool. I just recently downloaded the score on Apple Music. You can get it on there. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. There's some good 80s pop rock, I think. Oingo Boingo done a song called No One Lives Forever, and that is a classic. If you can download it, I strongly recommend it. Or check it out here on YouTube. No One Lives Forever. And that's one thing about the early Texas Chainsaw Massacres. I love their soundtracks. Part 2 is kind of a poppy rock kind of feel to it. Part 3 was like a metal thrash hard rock vibe. But if I'm going to say what my favorite part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the thing that I appreciate nowadays that I really didn't appreciate back then was how different Tobe Hooper went. He went in a total different direction. A lot of people probably thought he was crazy, and he may have been high the way they talked, but he did it his way. And Texas Chainsaw 2's got a cult following now, and it's so different. You can enjoy it for what it is, man. It's gory. Tom Savini did the special effects and the makeup, so Tom Savini is another iconic figure. I know I throw that word around a lot because me and Jerry did horror icons the other day, but Tom Savini, a legend in the genre. Now on to my personal favorite sequel, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. It was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I had watched, and I have to give the story on how I become obsessed with the franchise. And it starts with this film. My mom had took me down to get our brother. He went to a friend's house. So we had traveled to get him, and she told me to go in and get him. So I knock on the door. The parents of the kid says, yeah, they're in the back room. You can go get him. So I walk in that back room, and about 4 or 5 boys are watching Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 on a box TV on VHS. And as soon as I walk in, and it's no joke, I promise you, I got no lies to tell. I walk in, and it's on the scene where Tex gives Leatherface his chainsaw, and the chainsaw I'm talking about is the Excalibur, the golden chainsaw, the massive one. And it's my first time seeing Leatherface, and R.A. Mihalow's portrayal is sinister, is how I would describe it. And I'm watching this on there, and I'm like, this is the wildest thing that I've ever seen. The music, the score was creepy. I mean, I can just remember it. I was in Toby Newsom's house, I think, Verl and Rosella's. But the way Leatherface was holding that chainsaw and his teeth, the blood on his mask, and just the feel, I was like, I can remember Rocky leaving, and we went out to Mom and Dad's car, and I was like, what was you all watching in there? What was that? That was the scariest thing I've ever seen. So he told me. Fast forward a couple weeks later, I go to Darvine. Actually, it was Darvine's store, but it was called Pappy's Video. And I see the box, and I rent it. And me and my brother, Rocky, watch it at my grandparents' house. And from that moment on, dude, I had a nightmare. I'll never forget. I went and laid down with my grandpa, and I had some awful nightmares about that movie at that night. I was probably 5 years old, I think, 5 years old. And I had really bad dreams that night. And I woke up, and I walked in the living room probably about 3:30 or 4 to try to find Rocky. And he was in there watching something he shouldn't have been watching on Cinemax. And he made me go back to bed. But that next morning, the first thing I did was put it in and rewind it and watch it again over and over until now. I still watch it. And it's a lot different. The family is different, which it's a different dynamic with them, and it's really good. A lot of people don't care much for it. I do. I think when I was a kid, I thought they were another take on the brothers, but I'm assuming that maybe they were cousins or nephews of the original brother. I don't know how to explain it. But Tex, Tinker, then Leatherface had a daughter, and then Mama. Grandpa's there, but he's a corpse. But the mother who played in that one, Miriam Bird Netherly, I loved her. I thought she did a really good job as the mother figure for Leatherface. Unlike the rest of the franchise's portrayal, if there's been a lady or a mother figure, part 3, Mama was the best by far, in my opinion. I love the soundtrack. The Terror Truck, Leatherface and the family have an awesome old Ford truck. I actually talked to R.A. Mihailoff about that truck. And when we were talking about it, I was asking him, he said, you know one thing about that truck? He said there was always a mechanic that was available working on it. It always tore up. He said, but the bright side was he always worked on my old trucks too, or my motorcycle. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while back, but he basically said that he got his stuff worked on by the mechanic that was always working on the Leatherface Terror Truck. But another one, I mean, that's my favorite sequel of the franchise. I thought R.A. did a really good job. He's my, besides Gunner, R.A.'s right there, which Gunner started it. He was the measuring stick. Other than Gunner, I like a lot of the guys that portrayed Leatherface, R.A. being the next, just because he was physical. He had the build. I mean, you could tell he was a professional wrestler, which he got started after that, but just his charisma as the character. I love the way he looks in the mirror and takes his tongue around his rotted teeth, which his teeth look more decayed in this one than they did in the original when they were kind of just spaced out, like hillbilly teeth you would buy at Hillbilly Days, or Bubba teeth, or what was it? Billy Bob teeth. The mask was done by Greg Nicotero, and you can tell they really wanted it to look. I love that when it comes on, actually, spoiler alert, a lady is killed by a sledgehammer and she's got a rose tattoo right here. Well, in that opening sequence, he kills her, skins her face, and cuts it up. It's one of the most intense scenes to watch, is Leatherface cutting that face up and the way he's sewing it, and I mean, it's real intense. That's a great scene. They pay homage to Gunner when the girl steps on something outside the window. She's checking him out, and Leatherface steps out, grabs the door, and slams it like Gunner does in the original. I thought that movie should have spawned a couple more sequels just on that take. It came out in '90, so we really didn't get another Texas Chainsaw Massacre until it was made in '94, and it did get released to like '97, and it was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. But before I jump into that, let me rewind back and tell you what I liked most about Texas Chainsaw 3. I love the soundtrack. I love the chainsaw. I love R.A. Mihailoff's portrayal. I love the truck. It ain't really fair to tell you one thing because I love that film all the way through, man. Everything about Texas Chainsaw 3 is superb. So I recommend it strongly. Now, fast forward to Texas Chainsaw. Actually, it was called The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then, a couple of the actors, you may know them, Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, right after they filmed that, Renee Zellweger went on to do Jerry Maguire and became a big-time actress, and Matthew McConaughey went on to do A Time to Kill and become a leading man. So they put a stop. They had their lawyers basically get a hold of them and say, do not put this out, because they kind of felt like their star was rising and they didn't want this cheap. It was a cheaper made movie, a horror movie to come out. Matthew McConaughey, I'll just go ahead and tell you straight up, deserved some sort of an award for Leatherface's brother, Vilmer. I'll just go ahead and tell you straight up, that's the favorite thing I liked about that film. When it first came out, I was really confused. I didn't care much for it. But the one thing I did like was Matthew McConaughey's portrayal of Leatherface's crazy brother, Vilmer, with the mechanical leg. He is a maniac. I mean, honestly, he's one of the best actors in a long time, but the way he portrayed that madman, he was realistic, he was scary, he was dominant. Man, Vilmer is worth checking out on Texas. If you don't like it, I mean, the portrayal of Leatherface by Robert Jacks was disappointing, to say the least. I felt like they really toned the character down in that one and made him more of a whiny kid, a whiny baby almost. Man, I was really, if they would have made if R.A. Mahaloff's version, or let me rewind it, if Matthew McConaughey played part 3 with Viggo Mortensen and Joe Unger, it would have just been a nuclear bomb going off. But if Robert Jacks, that was the script he was gave, obviously, it wasn't his fault, but it's a little bit different. He's got another brother, W.E., which is, he's always quoting poets and stuff, and not much to him. He's got a girlfriend. She was the teacher in Varsity Blues. She was entertaining. I liked her. It was Tony Perinsky, I think, was her name. But the older I get, the more I kind of appreciate it. I like it. It's fun to watch. I mean, you ain't going to go into it and be horrified or nothing. You're going to be on edge watching Matthew McConaughey for sure, because he did if anything, it's worth checking out for his performance. So, Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre / Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. What do I like most about it? Hands down, Matthew McConaughey's portrayal of Vilmer. He'd always stick the fingers out like that, point at you before he said something, or sometimes he'd stick his fingers like that in their mouth. So after Next Generation, we waited forever. There was rumors of more chainsaws coming out. There was rumors of TX-25, I think was what the script was called. I searched on the internet all the time for information. Couldn't get much. I think the company that was going to make it went bankrupt, if I'm not mistaken. So everything was dead in the water for a long, long time. From 97 to 2003, to be exact. And that's when we have the Platinum Dunes remake. It's basically, I call it Texas Chainsaw Massacre 03. And they put a lot of money into it, but they did it right. And for that to come out, I was going to be the harshest critic there was, just because I wish that they had, at the time, I was like, man, they should have just done a sequel to the original. They should have, but when everything started coming out, plot details and set photos, I started getting a little excited. And then when I found out that Andrew Bernarski was playing Leatherface, who played Latimer in the program, Zangief in Street Fighter 2, or not Street Fighter, just Street Fighter the movie, and he was in Batman Returns, and he's just a real intimidating actor. I knew that he was going to bring intensity to the role. He was going to be different than Gunner, which I always think that Andrew's role kind of was like a little bit like the one that R.A. did in part 3. He was kind of more vicious. He was a lot more vicious. He had a different motive. He had been picked on. But Jessica Biel, Eric Balfour, Erica Learson, my bad. Erica Learson, I love her. She was in Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, redheaded girl. She done good. They had a good cast, actually. They had, but it was totally different. The family dynamic was different. Leatherface had I guess I want to say it was his uncle, Sheriff Hoyt, or older brother. They explain it a little better in the prequel, but I always took it that it was his older brother. And then they had the mother, and I always thought old Monty was the uncle, which he may be. He was legless in a wheelchair. The setting, I love the set. I love the house. I thought the house was a little too big, but it was nice. I mean, it fit the narrative. I liked it. They basically hit a home run. I think it's probably the best horror remake there is, personally. And that means a lot because the original is my favorite movie ever. They just knocked it out of the park. Won lots of awards, made a lot of money, and they went on to spawn a prequel that was really good also. The Platinum Dunes remake and prequel are top notch. You can't say nothing bad about them. What I liked most about the remake was I liked Arlie Ermey's involvement as Sheriff Hoyt. I love the setting. I love the slaughterhouse. I love how the third act in the slaughterhouse. I loved the feel of it, the steam, the cold steel, the water everywhere, the hanging meat. I thought they played that out perfectly, the chase in the slaughterhouse. It was near perfect. And that's probably one of my favorite settings in a chainsaw movie was that act in that slaughterhouse. That would probably be what I like best. Now, move a few years later, I think '06. Yeah, it was '06. The prequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, two brothers going off to Vietnam and their girlfriends. It shows the birth of Leatherface in a slaughterhouse in the '30s, I think it was. His mommy was drinking and had a premature birth. It's pretty graphic. And the baby's born deformed. The owner of the slaughterhouse throws it away. And then the mother in the remake is outside looking for meat because they're poor. She picks up the baby, takes it home, and raises it, and introduces it to Sheriff Hoyt, who's not Sheriff Hoyt yet, he's Charlie. He actually comes across the sheriff, or the sheriff comes to him because he finds out Leatherface killed the owner of the slaughterhouse. And once the sheriff gets ready to arrest Leatherface, Charlie shoots the real Sheriff Hoyt, steals his identity and his clothes, and the rest is history. I liked a lot of that. The one thing that really I could have done without was the bikers. I didn't like the bikers in it. But other than that, I thought Matt Bomer done a really good job in the lead. He done really good. I like the settings also, very similar to the remake. The kills were brutal. If I had to pick something that I like most about the beginning, it's probably when he uses the mask of Matt Bomer's character, and when he cuts it off and puts it on. I always thought that was a real creepy mask. I like that one. So that ends the Platinum Dunes. Okay. Fast forward a few more years and we get Texas Chainsaw 3D. Now, I was very excited for this. I was not to toot my own horn, I was one of the first people to talk to Dan Yeager about the role just by sheer luck. Once I found out he was playing the role of Leatherface, I started researching him. I found a little short film that he made. Somebody made it and had him as a killer. And it's not even like a brutal, it just shows him sitting in a car and a young lady walks in and it's playing some real down, creepy music, and his face looks like it's made of granite or something. And he just walks in and she looks up, he's got a hammer, and then blood splashes against the wall, and I was like, my goodness. I do like who they got to play Leatherface this time. I think this guy will do good. So I start searching Dan Yeager and somehow find him on Facebook, and I send him a message. Just ask him his thoughts about the role and everything, and I didn't expect to get anything back. What I got back was a pretty good article. He told me he ripped off Gunnar Hansen. He wanted to play Gunnar's version of Leatherface aged, and he ripped him off as best he could, and everything he did, he patterned after Gunnar. Gunnar and Marilyn Burns, Sally from the original, and John Dugan have roles in this film, along with Bill Moseley playing the cook at the front. The first 15 minutes of the movie is awesome. I think Sam McKenzie played Leatherface, a relatively unknown actor, at the front as young Leatherface, which I don't know why they didn't have Dan do that. They went a different route. Gunnar at the front of it, just seeing him in the old chainsaw house as a different character was cool. He was Boss Sawyer. He was kind of like, I don't know if he was the dad to the brothers, or if he was like the uncle, the older uncle, or whatever it was cool to see. But once that happens, the Sawyer family, we get to see a few more of them just show up at the house after the events of the original take place, and a woman has a baby. They think that they burnt the house and killed all the family, and all the lynch mobs investigating, looking around and stuff after they burnt the house, and they come across a lady that's been injured and she's holding a baby, and one of the guys takes the baby, gives it to his wife. It grows up and becomes a beautiful young lady, actually. And what's her name? Slipping my mind. I've been sitting here thinking names. I keep wanting to say it. Alexandra Daddario. That's it. She was amazing in that, and she's like Leatherface's first cousin or something like that, maybe second or third, but she's called to take care of him. And if I had to pick something I like the most about Texas Chainsaw 3D, it would be Gunnar Hansen, or not Gunnar, yeah, it would be Gunnar getting to play another Texas Chainsaw movie, his involvement, and Marilyn, and also Dan Yeager's performance, because he did it brilliantly. He did it good. He was respectful to the role. He brought some new things. I liked the way he limped. I thought that was awesome. Dan Yeager deserves a pat on the back for his job as Leatherface. After Texas Chainsaw 3D, we get Leatherface, and it's a mess. I don't like it. If I had to pick, I mean, it's a prequel to the original. This timeline's tough. So it's a prequel to the original, and it starts out with young people in like a mental asylum, and it makes you think that Leatherface is this heavy-set, burly kid, and it goes all through it. They're on the run from the cops. Come to find out it's not. It's a young, good-looking guy, normal teenager that becomes Leatherface. It was shot in Bulgaria. The only thing that I will say I liked about that film is Stephen Dorff as the sheriff. I like Stephen Dorff as an actor. He was good with the character of the sheriff. And even at that, man, there's really not much I can positively say about that movie. I didn't like it. It just didn't feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Fast forward to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Netflix. Well, I was on edge. After the last Chainsaw, I didn't have high hopes. The only thing I did realize was that it can't be worse than that. What I got was I was pleasantly surprised. I liked Mark Burnham's take on the character. I thought it was a lot like Dan Yeager. I thought it was a lot like Gunnar Hansen. Those three together were very similar. They did really well. Mark Burnham played the role good. I don't want to give too many spoilers away about that one because it's relatively new. But I will say Mark Burnham did a great job. The setting, it was filmed in Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken. But it felt a whole lot different than the one before that. The bus scene was cool. You'll know what I'm talking about. The bus scene is cool. It's a massacre. There's a lot of blood. It's a lot of fun. I liked his costume a lot. I liked the mask. I thought it was neat how that all happened. It's hard. I don't want to ruin this one for you guys because, like I said, you can go to Netflix right now. I like John Larroquette coming back for the narration on the DVD that it's showing at the gas station. You'll check that out. It's a pretty cool little nod if you're a fan of the franchise. Sally's back in this one. That was kind of a letdown the way they portrayed her. The actress didn't do bad. It was just kind of her character. She'd become a Texas Ranger and had been chasing Leatherface and the family. And when she finally gets up with him, the meeting is it's a head scratcher to say the least. So I enjoyed that one. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm looking forward to sequels of it. Hopefully, Mark Burnham did a great job as Leatherface. I'm excited to meet him. Hopefully in the future, get his autograph. If I get a chance, that's actually going to be my Halloween costume this year. Is the new Leatherface. I did part 3 last year. I felt like I did really good on it. So that's what I've got to look forward to. It's August right now, August 18th. How could I forget? That's what this is all about. August 18th. So I've got a couple months to get it ready. Thank you guys for tuning in to this Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode. I appreciate all you guys tuning in. Share this, like it, subscribe. I'm getting ready to do a podcast with a guy from J13. I think that's what it's called. J13 Custom Mask and Costumes. So look for it on the audio Wild Time podcast tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you later.